poor young lawyer walked into a glittering corporate tower one morning, carrying nothing but her files and her dignity. What she didn't know was that the elderly cleaner scrubbing the marble floors wasn't who she appeared to be. Behind that plain uniform was the mother of one of the richest men in the city, a billionaire hiding in plain sight. What happened next would shake the company's foundations, expose schemes that had been buried for years, and test the true meaning of loyalty and love. Sometimes the most powerful person in the building isn't the one in the corner office. It's the woman everyone ignores with a mop in her hand. They thought they were humiliating a cleaner. Instead, they were testing the heart of the very woman who held the key to the billionaire's legacy. This is the story of how a poor girl's kindness to a stranger changed her destiny forever, and how a mother's disguise revealed the truth about love, greed, and family. But just before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? And if you love stories filled with secrets, betrayal, and unexpected twists, make sure you subscribe, because tomorrow's episode will be even more shocking. The perfume of money lingered in the marble lobby of the Johnson Tower, where glass walls reflected the city's golden skyline. Polished floors gleamed like mirrors, and every step echoed wealth, ambition, and ruthless competition. Yet on this morning, whispers spread through the lobby as security guards barked at an elderly cleaner, her wrinkled hands clutching a mop. "Move aside, old woman," one of the managers sneered loudly. "This is not your place to loiter. Don't stain the lobby with your dirty rags." Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. The cleaner lowered her head, her voice trembling as she apologized. She looked fragile, bent by age and years of unseen labor. The elite staff and clients passing by barely noticed her, except for one. Amelia. Her heels clicked across the marble as she stopped, her slim figure outlined in a modest navy suit. She was young, only a few years into her law career, and though her clothes were not designer, her confidence filled the space like quiet thunder. She placed her files down and turned to the mocking manager. "Enough," Amelia said, her tone calm but firm. "She is old enough to be your mother. Show her respect." The lobby fell silent. Some gasped. Nobody ever spoke back to Mr. Felix, the arrogant floor manager who prided himself on crushing juniors. He smirked. "And who are you to lecture me, little lawyer? Do you even know whose building this is?" Amelia stepped closer, her eyes steady. "Yes. And I also know that dignity is not for sale. Not even here." The cleaner looked up, her faded eyes glistening. She studied Amelia with quiet intensity, as though measuring every ounce of her courage. Security guards shifted uneasily. Mr. Felix waved them off with irritation, grumbling, but Amelia had already helped the old woman steady her mop and whispered, "Don't worry, ma'am. Not everyone here has forgotten their humanity." The old woman gave a faint smile, almost secretive, and replied softly, "My dear, you have no idea who is watching." Amelia frowned at the strange words. And as she walked away, she didn't see the elderly cleaner slip a phone from her pocket, sending a short message that would change everything. "I've found her." Amelia adjusted her blazer as she stepped into the 40th floor of Johnson Group, one of the most powerful corporate empires in the city. The glass walls offered a view of Lagos's finest skyline, where helicopters landed on rooftop pads, where luxury cars dotted the streets below like jewels, and where the weight of money pressed against every breath. She carried a thick stack of files, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. The long nights spent drafting documents had left dark shadows beneath them. Yet despite her hard work, Amelia always felt like an outsider here. She didn't come from wealth. She didn't have a famous last name. She had clawed her way into Johnson Group through sheer brilliance. Yet some colleagues never let her forget her modest background. As she entered the open office, the usual whispers floated around her. "There she is, the charity case. Rumor is she begged her way into this job. Let's see how long she lasts." Amelia ignored them, focusing instead on her desk by the far window. She was used to the whispers. They had followed her since law school, where students with powerful fathers mocked her for studying on scholarships. Yet, their laughter only fueled her fire. Still, one whisper kept circling the halls louder than the rest. The heir. Nobody had seen him. The mysterious Thomas Johnson, the billionaire son and future CEO, was rumored to be young, ruthless, and almost invisible. He never attended board meetings in person. He never showed up in the media. Only stories drifted around, painting him as both genius and phantom. Some said he lived abroad. Others claimed he secretly visited the company disguised as someone ordinary. The uncertainty made the staff restless, always wondering if the man standing beside them in the elevator might secretly own the floor they worked on. Amelia brushed off the gossip, though a part of her was curious. Not because she dreamed of meeting a billionaire, she had no illusions about her place in such a world, but because she knew that whoever Thomas Johnson was, his decisions affected every lawyer, every secretary, every cleaner in this tower. Her boss, Mr. Bernard, stepped out of his glass office, scanning the floor. "Amelia, my office." "Now." She hurried in, clutching her files, bracing herself. Mr. Bernard was known for his sharp tongue. "You've been assigned to the Vargas case," he said without preamble. His sharp eyes searched her face. "It's high profile. If you mess this up, you won't just embarrass yourself, you'll embarrass the Johnson Group." Amelia's heart raced. The Vargas case involved one of the city's most notorious real estate moguls, accused of laundering millions through shell companies. Handling it could either destroy her or elevate her career to heights she had never dreamed of. "I won't fail, sir," Amelia said firmly, though her palms grew damp. As she left his office, she nearly collided with a young man carrying a stack of documents higher than his head. The papers slipped, scattering across the floor. Amelia bent down instantly, helping him gather them. "Sorry, I should have watched where I was going," she said with a small smile. The young man looked up at her. His eyes were calm, kind, with a depth that surprised her. He was dressed plainly in a simple white shirt and tie, and in turn, no doubt. "No, it's my fault," he said softly. "Thank you." Their hands brushed briefly as they reached for the same file. Amelia felt an odd flicker in her chest, though she quickly dismissed it. She couldn't afford distractions. She handed him the last file and walked away, unaware that her path had just crossed with the one person everyone was whispering about. And at that very moment, far below on the ground floor, the elderly cleaner who had been humiliated yesterday stood quietly by a window, watching the world. She held her mop loosely, but her mind was sharp. Her lips curled into a secret smile. She had already noticed the way her son's eyes followed Amelia. The game had begun. The morning sun poured through the high glass panes of Johnson Tower, turning the lobby into a golden cathedral of wealth. The air smelled of polished marble and expensive perfume, as executives in tailored suits swept past without a second glance at the woman mopping the floors. The cleaner, her name unknown to most, moved quietly, her back slightly bent, her wrinkled hands gripping the mop as though it were part of her. She wore a faded uniform and simple shoes, blending into the background like a shadow. To the world, she was invisible. But in truth, she was Mrs. Eleanor Johnson, the matriarch of the empire, the widow of the founder, and mother of the elusive heir, Thomas Johnson. She had everything money could buy: estates, power, influence. But she had disguised herself as a cleaner because she believed something wealth had stolen from her son: the chance to find genuine love. She wanted to see who could treat a powerless cleaner with respect, not because of her name, but because of her humanity. And that's when Amelia caught her attention. From her station near the elevator, Eleanor had watched the young lawyer for 2 days now. Amelia moved through the building with a determined stride, never bending her head despite the whispers, never allowing insults to crush her spirit. She greeted the security guards by name. She thanked the secretaries. And yesterday, she had stood up against that arrogant manager when everyone else had looked away. "Different," Eleanor murmured under her breath as she wiped the edge of a glass table, her sharp eyes hidden behind her frail disguise. "That one is different." She tested her theory almost immediately. As Amelia passed by carrying a pile of heavy folders, Eleanor stumbled deliberately, spilling her cleaning bucket. Soapy water spread across the polished floor, drenching Amelia's shoes and threatening to ruin her files. Some passing staff laughed cruelly. One even muttered, "Clumsy old thing." But Amelia didn't snap. She didn't roll her eyes like the others would have. Instead, she set her files safely on a desk and bent down to help. "It's all right, don't worry," Amelia said, gently steadying the cleaner's trembling hands. "Accidents happen." Eleanor looked up at her, studying her closely. There was no irritation in her tone, no superiority in her gaze. Only kindness. "Thank you, my dear," Eleanor whispered, her voice shaky but her mind sharp, filing this moment away. Later, during her lunch break, Amelia sat in the cafeteria alone with her salad and a thick legal document. Eleanor shuffled in, pretending to wipe the corners of the room. From behind her mop, she watched as groups of junior associates mocked Amelia for bringing her own food instead of buying from the luxury restaurant upstairs. "She's saving every penny," one sneered. "Pathetic," another laughed. But Amelia ignored them. She ate quietly, then returned to her work, her dignity untouched. Eleanor's lips pressed into a smile. Yes, this girl was not just strong. She had something more, a humility that wealth could never buy. That night, when Eleanor returned to her private penthouse high above the city, she shed her cleaner's uniform and transformed back into the powerful matriarch the world recognized. But even as she sipped champagne and looked down at the sparkling skyline, her mind replayed the young lawyer's words. Accidents happen. Don't worry. Her instincts told her she had found something rare. And when her son entered the room later, still dressed as a simple intern, she said softly, I think I've found the one. Thomas froze, the words hanging between them like prophecy. The next morning, Amelia walked into the 45th floor conference lounge, a space that looked more like a luxury hotel than an office. The chandeliers sparkled with imported crystals, the couches were stitched from Italian leather, and the smell of expensive cologne floated in the air. It was where the inner circle of wealthy junior executives liked to gather before meetings, those whose fathers were politicians, oil magnates, or old money elites. Amelia had been asked to drop off some files there, and she knew what awaited her. Sneers, whispers, and the sharp edges of people who had been raised to believe they owned the world. Look who's here, said Cassandra, the elegant daughter of a banking tycoon, sipping her champagne as though she were already at a gala. Her diamond earrings caught the light as she tilted her head. The scholarship girl. The room laughed. Amelia set the files down quietly, keeping her expression unreadable. Another voice chimed in, Edward, whose family owned one of the largest shipping companies in Africa. He leaned back lazily in his chair, his Rolex flashing. I heard she still rents a one-bedroom apartment in the mainland. Imagine working in this tower and going home to that. The others chuckled. Cassandra smirked. Tell me, Amelia, do you ever get tired of pretending you belong here? For a moment, silence filled the room. Amelia straightened her shoulders. Her dark eyes locked on Cassandra's. I don't pretend, she said calmly. I belong here because I work harder than most of you ever will. While you were handed everything, I built myself. That's why I can stand here without shame. The room went still. Edward coughed awkwardly, surprised at her courage. Cassandra's smile tightened, but her eyes betrayed irritation. Bold words, Cassandra said coolly. But let's see how long boldness pays your bills. Amelia gave a small, confident smile. Boldness already pays mine. Good day. She picked up her files and walked out, leaving the room in stunned silence. Unbeknownst to her, two pairs of eyes had witnessed everything. From the corner, the elderly cleaner stood polishing a glass table, her ears tuned to every word. She almost chuckled behind her mop at Amelia's composure. Few dared to challenge Cassandra and Edward. Yet this young lawyer had cut through their arrogance without raising her voice. And just outside the lounge door, Daniel, the intern, who was secretly Thomas Johnson, had paused on his way to deliver a file. He had heard Amelia's every word. He found himself smiling faintly, impressed by her steel. Later that day, when Amelia passed through the lobby, Eleanor, still in her cleaner's uniform, stepped deliberately into her path. Strong words today, my dear, the old woman said softly, pretending to wipe the marble floor. Amelia frowned. You heard that. Walls have ears, Eleanor replied with a mysterious smile. Don't lose that fire. The world will try to shame you, but dignity is your greatest weapon. Amelia hesitated, struck by the strange wisdom in the woman's tone. She nodded, thanked her, and walked away. Eleanor watched her go, her heart already certain. Yes, this girl was not only kind, she had fire. But upstairs, Cassandra seethed. She wasn't going to forget being humiliated by a nobody. Plans were already forming in her mind. The sun was dipping low, turning the glass walls of Johnson Tower into molten gold. Amelia, exhausted after hours of reviewing contracts, decided to take a short break. She made her way to the 20th floor library, a quiet space few employees used, with high bookshelves, leather chairs, and the faint scent of old wood and paper. There, she found him. The polite intern she had bumped into days earlier. He sat at a corner desk, papers scattered around him, his shirt sleeves rolled up to the elbow. His dark hair fell slightly into his eyes as he scribbled notes, his focus so intense that he didn't notice her at first. Amelia hesitated. She had work to do, but something about his calm presence drew her in. She moved to the far side of the room, spreading out her own documents. A few minutes later, a folder slipped from her pile, its papers sliding across the floor. Before she could move, The intern was already there, crouching to gather them. You again, Amelia said with a small smile. He handed her the papers, his gaze steady but gentle. Seems I have a habit of showing up whenever your files try to escape. Amelia laughed softly, a sound she hadn't allowed herself in days. She studied him more closely now. His clothes were simple, his tie slightly loose, but there was something in his posture, something controlled, almost regal. An aura that didn't match an ordinary intern. Do you always stay this late? She asked. Work keeps me grounded, he said with a shrug. Then, after a pause, he added, And what about you? Why work so hard when half the people here were born into positions you had to fight for? Amelia blinked, surprised by the question. Most interns wouldn't dare to speak so directly. She leaned back in her chair, choosing her words carefully. Because if I don't, she said, they win. And I don't plan on losing. The intern's lips curved slightly, as if her answer confirmed something he already suspected. I like that, he murmured. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. By the way, Amelia said, tilting her head, I don't even know your name. Daniel, he replied smoothly, without hesitation. She extended her hand. Amelia. Their handshake lingered just a moment too long. Neither noticed the shadow watching them from outside the library's glass doors. It was Eleanor, still in her cleaner's uniform. She had followed her son after his shift, curious where he would go. Now, she saw him with Amelia, speaking as though they had known each other for years. Her lips curved into a secret smile. Yes, the spark was there. But would it survive the storm that was coming? Later that night, as Amelia packed up her things, she found herself thinking about the intern named Daniel. There was something about him she couldn't quite place, something that didn't fit. And in another corner of the city, Daniel, Thomas Johnson in truth, sat in his private penthouse, staring out at the lights of Lagos. For the first time in years, he felt unsettled. The disguise had always been easy. But now there was Amelia. The Johnson penthouse glittered above the city like a jewel in the night sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Lagos's skyline, where neon lights pulsed and cars flowed like rivers of gold. Inside, silence reigned, broken only by the faint hum of an air purifier and the clink of crystal as Eleanor Johnson poured herself a glass of red wine. Her son entered quietly, still dressed in his intern attire. He loosened his tie and ran a hand through his hair, a deep crease between his brows. He had lived 2 lives so long that the act no longer weighed on him, until now. You're late, Eleanor said softly, her eyes studying him over the rim of her glass. Or rather, Daniel is late. Thomas, my son, is simply hiding. He gave her a tired smile. Mother, can we not do this tonight? But Eleanor leaned forward, her voice sharp with conviction. No. Tonight we must talk. Thomas sighed, sinking into the leather chair opposite her. What is it? I saw you with her, Eleanor said simply. His head lifted sharply. Her. The young lawyer, Eleanor continued, her gaze unwavering. Amelia. Thomas froze, his carefully built mask cracking. You've been watching me? Eleanor chuckled softly. My dear, I have eyes everywhere. Do you think I would wear this ridiculous cleaner's uniform for pleasure? I wanted to see who she truly was, when she thought no one important was watching. And, he asked cautiously, she defended me when others mocked me, Eleanor said, her tone steady. She treated me with kindness when she had nothing to gain. And today, she faced Cassandra and Edward as if she had been born for war. That girl has fire and humility. A rare combination, Thomas. Thomas leaned back, his jaw tightening. Mother, you're reading too much into this. She's just another employee. Eleanor shook her head firmly. No, she is not just another employee. You saw it too, didn't you? I saw the way you looked at her in the library. You weren't just curious. You were drawn to her. Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he didn't have a quick reply. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. You've been searching for something real, Thomas. A woman who will see you for who you are, not for your money, your name, or your empire. I believe Amelia might be that woman. Silence stretched between them. Thomas turned toward the vast window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes like restless stars. She's strong, yes, he admitted at last. But mother, if she discovers the truth, if she finds out I've been lying about who I am, she'll hate me. Eleanor's expression softened. If she truly is the one, she will forgive you. But if she isn't, better to know sooner than later. Thomas exhaled heavily, torn between duty and desire. He had built walls around his heart to protect himself from false love. But Amelia, Amelia was breaking through them without even trying. Eleanor set down her wine glass with quiet finality. Mark my words, Thomas. That girl is going to change everything. And as the city hummed below, neither of them realized how soon Eleanor's prediction would come true. The Johnson Group's 42nd floor boardroom was a temple of power. Polished mahogany table, walls lined with abstract art worth millions, and a panoramic view of the city that reminded every visitor of their place beneath the empire. Amelia stood at the far end, files clutched tightly in her hands, her nerves hidden behind a calm exterior. Mr. Bernard, her sharp-tongued boss, cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vargas case has officially been moved under my supervision. And to my surprise, he glanced at Amelia with a hint of disdain. Our very own Miss Amelia has been chosen to draft the initial defense documents. A low murmur spread around the room. Several lawyers smirked, clearly betting on her failure. The Vargas case was no ordinary legal battle. It was a storm. The Vargas family controlled half the city's real estate market, and their alleged crimes of laundering funds through shell corporations were enough to shake the entire financial system. Handling them would be like walking through fire. Amelia felt the weight of the stairs, but lifted her chin. I'll do it, she said firmly. Mr. Bernard nodded curtly. Good. But you won't be working alone. You'll have an assistant. He gestured toward the door. The handle turned, and in walked the one face Amelia hadn't expected to see. Daniel. The intern carried a notebook, his expression calm but unreadable. He gave her a brief nod, almost formal. Amelia blinked, caught off guard. She had assumed he was just another temporary worker. But now he was being placed directly under her supervision on one of the firm's most dangerous cases. You'll report to Amelia for everything related to Vargas, Bernard instructed. If she succeeds, you succeed. If she fails, you both fail. Dismissed. The meeting ended in a flurry of voices, but Amelia's thoughts were louder than the noise. Later, in her office, Daniel entered quietly with the files. He set them down, his sleeves rolled up as usual, his tie slightly loosened. He looked nothing like the arrogant sons of wealth she had dealt with earlier. You don't have to do this, she said, narrowing her eyes. Vargas is dangerous. People have lost their jobs over cases smaller than this. Daniel met her gaze steadily. Then it's better not to face it alone. Something in his tone unsettled her. Not arrogance, not pity, but a quiet strength. She found herself staring at him longer than she should have, then quickly looked down at the documents. Fine, she said briskly. If you're serious, we work late nights. No excuses. No mistakes. I don't make excuses, he replied softly. For the next few days, the two worked side by side in long stretches of silence, broken by sudden bursts of debate. Amelia was sharp, meticulous, dissecting every loophole in the Vargas Empire's contracts. Daniel surprised her. He wasn't just competent, he was brilliant. He noticed details others might overlook, patterns buried deep in the paperwork. One evening, as the office lights dimmed and most employees left, Amelia rubbed her temples, exhausted. Daniel slid a cup of coffee across the desk toward her. You look like you need this more than me, he said. She accepted it reluctantly, taking a sip. The bitter warmth spread through her chest, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to smile. Not bad, she said. He leaned against the desk, his eyes resting on her. You're different from the others here. Amelia raised a brow. Different how? You work for the fight, not for the spotlight, he said simply. His words struck her, though she hid her reaction behind a smirk. Careful, Daniel. You'll make me think you're more than just an intern. Unbeknownst to her, she was closer to the truth than she realized. And outside her office, Eleanor, still disguised as the cleaner, passed by with her mop, catching the sight of Amelia and her son working late into the night. She smiled faintly, whispering to herself. Yes, the fire is growing. The higher Amelia climbed in the Johnson group, the sharper the knives around her became. Her work on the Vargas case had already stirred whispers in the corridors. Some said she was out of her depth. Others grudgingly admitted she was brilliant. And a few, like Cassandra and Edward, saw her growing reputation as a direct threat to their carefully guarded positions at the top of the company's social ladder. One evening, Cassandra and Edward sat together at the rooftop lounge, where executives often gathered after hours to sip cocktails beneath the city's glittering skyline. Cassandra's diamonds sparkled in the low light as she swirled her martini glass, her lips pressed into a thin smile. She's getting too comfortable, Cassandra said coldly. Bernard actually praised her work yesterday. Can you imagine? Praising her? Edward scoffed, adjusting his cufflinks. It won't last. These scholarship types always burn out. But perhaps we should give her a little push. Cassandra's eyes glinted. Push her or bury her? They leaned closer, plotting quietly, while laughter and music floated around them. The very next morning, Amelia felt the first sting of their schemes. A document she had been preparing for the Vargas case was suddenly missing from her desk. She searched everywhere, panic rising. Losing that file could mean disaster. When she asked the assistants if they had seen it, one of them smirked knowingly. Maybe you should keep better track of your things, Amelia. Not everyone here gets second chances. Her cheeks burned, but she forced herself to stay calm. Later, she found the missing file tucked behind the copier machine, deliberately hidden. She didn't need to guess who was behind it. That same week, Edward intercepted her during lunch. You know, Amelia, he said smoothly, you're playing a dangerous game. People don't like it when someone from nowhere suddenly tries to shine. You might want to remember your place. Amelia looked him dead in the eye. And you might want to remember that talent doesn't ask for permission. He frowned and used to defiance. Meanwhile, Daniel had been observing everything quietly. He saw the missing files. He saw the cold shoulders. He even overheard Edward's veiled threats. But he remained silent, choosing to watch how Amelia handled herself. And what he saw only deepened his respect for her. She didn't crumble. She didn't complain. She fought on, her determination burning brighter with every obstacle. One night, as they stayed late working through the Vargas documents, Daniel finally spoke. You know they're trying to break you, don't you? Amelia looked up from her laptop, her eyes tired but steady. Of course I know, but they'll have to try harder. Daniel smiled faintly. You don't let anything shake you. Not anymore, she said, closing her file. When you grow up with nothing, people think they can step on you. But if you survive that, their games feel small. He studied her in silence, a strange ache forming in his chest. She wasn't just strong, she was unshakable. And just outside, in the shadows of the corridor, Eleanor, still dressed as the cleaner, stood silently with her mop, listening to every word. Her lips curved into a knowing smile. But she also knew Cassandra's cruelty. And Eleanor feared that Amelia hadn't yet seen the worst of what was coming. The Vargas case had reached a boiling point. The boardroom was packed with senior lawyers, junior associates, and a handful of executives. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. Tension clung to the air like smoke. Amelia stood at the far end of the table, her files neatly arranged. She had spent sleepless nights dissecting Vargas's contracts, preparing a strategy that could shield Johnson Group from scandal. But Cassandra and Edward had other plans. Her approach is reckless, Cassandra said sharply, her diamond bracelet jingling as she gestured toward Amelia's report. If we follow her strategy, Vargas will eat us alive. Edward smirked. With respect, Mr. Bernard, this junior associate doesn't understand the complexity of dealing with a family as powerful as Vargas. We need someone with experience, not. He cast Amelia a cold look. Ambition. Amelia's jaw tightened. She opened her file and spoke firmly. With respect, the evidence I've presented shows clear trails of fraudulent accounts. If we corner them with these findings, they'll have no choice but to settle quietly. Playing safe only gives them more room to maneuver. A murmur rippled across the room. Some nodded in agreement. Others sided with Cassandra. Bernard leaned back, clearly torn. This is high stakes, Amelia. One wrong move, and the entire firm takes the blow. Cassandra pounced. Exactly. Why risk it on her? We should assign this to a senior partner. She's not ready. Silence followed. All eyes turned to Amelia, waiting to see if she would retreat or crumble. She took a deep breath. Her voice was calm, but it carried steel. With respect, readiness isn't measured by family names or years of privilege. It's measured by results. And my strategy is the only one that guarantees them. Cassandra's eyes flashed with fury. She opened her mouth to retort, when another voice cut through the room. I agree with her. The words were calm, almost casual, but they struck like thunder. Heads turned. Daniel, the intern, stood at the back of the room, a file in his hands. Bernard frowned. Excuse me? Who are you to speak in this meeting? Daniel walked forward slowly, his presence commanding in a way that unsettled even Cassandra. He placed the file on the table, flipping it open to reveal carefully cross-referenced documents. I've been assisting on this case, he said evenly. And Amelia's findings are accurate. Vargas has been using offshore companies to funnel assets. If we follow her approach, we don't just defend Johnson Group. We expose Vargas enough to force them into submission. It's bold, yes, but it's also the smartest path. The room went still. Cassandra laughed bitterly. You're just an intern. Do you think anyone here cares what you think? Daniel's gaze shifted to her, steady and unflinching. Perhaps not, but truth doesn't care who speaks it. Even Bernard hesitated, thrown off by the quiet authority in Daniel's tone. He turned to Amelia. If you're so confident in this strategy, I'll hold you responsible. But if this fails, your career here is over. Amelia nodded without hesitation. I accept. As the meeting ended, Cassandra stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the marble. Edward followed, muttering curses under his breath. Amelia packed her files, her heart still pounding. She turned to Daniel, her eyes searching his. You didn't have to do that. He gave her a small, knowing smile. Maybe I did. And for the first time, Amelia felt a flicker of something she didn't dare name. Gratitude. Curiosity. Maybe even trust. But what she didn't know was that the intern who had just defended her was the one man who could alter the course of her entire life. And watching from the corridor, Eleanor's lips curved into a satisfied smile. Her son had revealed just a sliver of his power, and Amelia hadn't looked away. The day after the boardroom clash, whispers still floated across the corridors of Johnson Group. Some couldn't believe Amelia had stood her ground against Cassandra. Others whispered about the intern who dared to challenge executives. But for Eleanor, the disguised cleaner, something far more important had taken root: hope. She had watched Amelia with sharp, knowing eyes. A girl who defended the truth at the risk of her career was no ordinary woman. But Eleanor knew kindness in the heart mattered more than brilliance in the brain. And to truly know Amelia's heart, she needed to test her. That morning, Eleanor intentionally dropped a bucket of water in the lobby, just as Amelia was walking past in her tailored navy suit. The water splashed across the polished floor, drawing annoyed glances from other employees. One receptionist sneered. Can't you be careful, old woman? Some of us actually work here. Eleanor hunched her shoulders, mumbling an apology. Then Amelia stopped. She bent down, took a handful of napkins from the front desk, and began wiping the water. Don't, the receptionist said, shocked. That's her job. Amelia looked up, her eyes steady. Then why are you standing here mocking instead of helping? The woman flushed and walked away angrily. Amelia stayed until the floor was clean. When she rose, Eleanor whispered, Thank you, ma'am. Amelia smiled. You don't have to call me that. My name is Amelia. The kindness was simple, but it pierced Eleanor's heart. Later that week, Eleanor tested her again. She deliberately forgot her lunch and sat quietly in the corner of the staff cafeteria while others ignored her. Amelia noticed. Without hesitation, she carried her own plate of steaming jollof rice and chicken and placed it in front of Eleanor. You need this more than I do, Amelia said. Eleanor shook her head. No, you worked hard. You eat. But Amelia simply pushed the plate closer. Please. I can eat later. The old woman's eyes watered, though she hid it with a cough. The final test came late one evening. Eleanor made her way to the parking lot, limping slightly as though in pain. Her bag slipped, scattering cleaning cloths across the concrete. Several lawyers walked past without stopping. Amelia, exhausted from a 12-hour day, bent down immediately and helped gather the items. You shouldn't be carrying so much, Amelia said softly. Do you have someone at home who helps you? Eleanor shook her head. No one. Amelia paused, looking into the wrinkled face before her. Something stirred deep in her chest. If you ever need help, ask me. Don't carry your burdens alone. For a moment, Eleanor couldn't speak. Her son had wealth, but here was a woman offering something rarer, genuine care without expectation. When Amelia drove away that night, Eleanor remained in the lot, her heart racing. She had seen enough. Amelia wasn't just intelligent or ambitious, she was kind. And Eleanor knew kindness was the foundation of a love that could endure power, envy, and secrets. But Eleanor also knew Cassandra wasn't finished. And if Cassandra sensed the bond forming between Amelia and Daniel, the storm ahead would be brutal. The office building had emptied hours ago, but 2 lights still glowed on the 22nd floor. Amelia sat at her desk, her blazer draped over the chair, her hair loose from its usual bun. Documents for the Vargas case were spread around her like puzzle pieces. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion pressing heavily on her shoulders. The quiet was broken by the sound of a door opening. She looked up, and there was Daniel, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "You've been at this since morning," he said, walking over. "Figured you'd need this." Amelia gave a tired smile. "Thank you. I didn't realize how long I'd been here." She took the cup, the warmth soothing her chilled fingers. For a while, they worked side by side, the silence between them comfortable. Then Daniel spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why law?" His eyes studied her, curious. "You could have done anything. Why this path?" Amelia leaned back in her chair, staring at the skyline glittering beyond the glass walls. "Because I grew up seeing people like my mother being cheated. Landlords, bosses, politicians, they all thought they could take advantage of us because we had no power. I promised myself I'd learn the rules of power, so no one could step on me again." Her voice was calm, but the bitterness underneath was clear. Daniel felt a tug in his chest. He had grown up in mansions, shielded from such struggles, but here was someone who had clawed her way into the same boardrooms his family owned. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever regret it? Fighting so hard?" Amelia turned to him, her expression softening. "Sometimes. It's lonely. But when I win, it feels worth it." Her honesty unsettled Daniel. He wanted to tell her who he truly was, to confess that he wasn't an intern but the man behind every name on the company's doors. Yet he stayed silent. Something told him if Amelia knew the truth too soon, she might put up walls he'd never be able to break. Instead, he opened up a different piece of himself. "You're not as alone as you think." Their eyes locked, and the air in the room shifted. For a moment, neither moved, the silence thick with unspoken words. Then Amelia blinked, breaking the spell. "I should finish this," she said softly, returning to her papers. But her hand trembled slightly as she picked up her pen. Daniel watched her, torn between restraint and the pull in his chest. He finally stood, gathering his things. At the door, he turned back. "Amelia, don't let them break you. You're stronger than they'll ever admit." She looked up, startled by the quiet intensity in his voice. Their eyes met once more, and this time she didn't look away. When Daniel left, Amelia sat in the silence, her heart beating faster than before. She told herself it was exhaustion. She told herself it was nothing. But deep inside, she knew something had begun, something dangerous, something unstoppable. And watching through the glass-cleaning partition, Eleanor's lips curved in the faintest smile. The fire between them had sparked. Now it only needed air to grow. Cassandra always paid attention to details. It was why she had lasted so long in the Johnson group despite her vanity and arrogance. And lately, her sharp eyes had caught something troubling. Amelia and the intern. She noticed how Daniel lingered near Amelia's desk, how their conversations stretched longer than necessary, how Amelia, usually cold and professional, softened ever so slightly when he was around. Cassandra's instincts screamed that this was more than casual friendship. One afternoon, she sat in the executive lounge, stirring her espresso slowly as Edward complained about Amelia's arrogance. Cassandra wasn't listening to his words. Her mind was already racing ahead. "She's clever," Cassandra said finally, interrupting him. "Too clever. And now she's found herself a loyal puppy to defend her." Edward frowned. "The intern? Please. He's irrelevant." Cassandra smiled thinly, her red lips curving like a blade. "Nothing is irrelevant when ambition is involved. Mark my words, Edward, Amelia is using him. She thinks she can climb by charming anyone who listens." Edward raised an eyebrow. "And what do you propose?" Cassandra leaned closer, her perfume intoxicating yet suffocating. "We watch. We wait. And then we set a trap so perfectly tailored that she won't even realize it until it's too late." Her chance came sooner than expected. The firm had been invited to an exclusive gala hosted by the Vargas family, an event filled with champagne, chandeliers, and the city's most powerful elite. Amelia was assigned to attend as part of the legal team. Daniel, surprisingly, was also listed as part of the support staff. Cassandra's eyes glittered when she saw the names. A public setting, overflowing with gossip-hungry eyes, it was the perfect stage for destruction. At the gala, Amelia entered in a sleek black gown, her hair swept elegantly back. She looked nothing like the girl who had once struggled to pay her rent. Heads turned, whispers followed. Even the Vargas heirs glanced twice. Daniel, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, stood by the champagne bar. His eyes lit up when he saw her, though he tried to mask it with calm restraint. Cassandra, draped in emerald silk and dripping with diamonds, observed from the corner. She saw the way Daniel moved toward Amelia, the way their gazes lingered, the way the world around them seemed to blur. And in that moment, Cassandra knew exactly how to strike. Later that night, she approached Amelia with feigned warmth. "You look stunning, Amelia. Truly. But perhaps you should be careful." Amelia blinked, confused. "Careful?" Cassandra's smile widened. "Oh dear. You don't know, do you? That intern of yours. He's been whispering about you. Telling people you're desperate to impress. That you'll do anything to stay in the spotlight." The lie dripped like poison. Amelia's stomach tightened. She tried to brush it off, but Cassandra's tone, so smooth and convincing, burrowed deep. Across the room, Daniel noticed Amelia's sudden stiffness. He started toward her, but Cassandra intercepted him with a charming laugh, leading him into a conversation with the Vargas family. From a distance, Eleanor watched everything unfold. Her grip tightened on her cane. She had seen women like Cassandra before, wolves in silk. And she knew if Amelia and Daniel weren't careful, Cassandra's trap could tear them apart before the truth even had a chance to breathe. Amelia couldn't shake Cassandra's words. The gala was still buzzing with music and laughter, but in her mind the words echoed like a curse. "He's been whispering about you. Telling people you're desperate to impress." She tried to dismiss it. Cassandra was manipulative, everyone knew that. But doubt had a way of planting itself like a seed, sprouting roots before you realized it. When Daniel finally found her near the balcony, his face lighting up, Amelia's heart did something strange. It faltered. "You disappeared," he said, handing her a glass of sparkling water. "I thought maybe you escaped this circus." Normally, she would have smiled. Instead, she forced a neutral expression. "I just needed air." Daniel studied her carefully. "Something wrong?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I'm fine." But her tone was clipped, her eyes distant. Daniel felt the wall she had just raised between them. Later, when they returned to the office, the tension grew heavier. Daniel leaned over her desk during a late-night strategy session, pointing out a section in the Vargas contract. Amelia subtly shifted back, avoiding the closeness she once tolerated without thought. He noticed. "Amelia," he said slowly, "did I do something?" She stiffened. "Why would you think that?" "Because you're looking at me like I've changed," Daniel replied, his voice calm but edged with hurt. Amelia hesitated. She wanted to dismiss it, but Cassandra's poison lingered. "People talk in this place. I can't afford to be seen as someone easily influenced." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Is that what you think of me? That I'd use you for appearances?" Amelia looked away, her chest tightening. "I don't know what to think." For the first time since he'd met her, Daniel felt something sharp cut through his composure. He had endured many things, mockery, betrayal, pressure, but Amelia's doubt stung like no other. He straightened, his voice lower. "If you don't know who I am by now, maybe you never will." The words hung heavy in the air. Amelia's throat tightened, but she didn't reply. When he walked out, silence filled the office. She sat alone, staring at the empty chair beside her, wondering if she had just pushed away the one person who believed in her without question. But across the hallway, Eleanor leaned against her mop, her heart heavy. She had wanted to test Amelia's kindness, but Cassandra's cruelty had gone further, striking at the bond Eleanor hoped would bloom. And Eleanor knew, if she didn't step in soon, Amelia and her son might lose each other before their love even had the chance to begin. Eleanor had lived long enough to know the games of the wealthy. She had watched marriages collapse, families betray each other, and empires crumble because of lies whispered at the right time. Cassandra's venom was no surprise, but what pained her was how deeply it had wounded both Amelia and Daniel. From her position as the invisible cleaner, Eleanor had observed their distance over the next week. Where there had once been laughter and easy conversation, now there was silence and polite formality. Daniel kept his tone clipped, professional, never lingering in Amelia's office longer than necessary. Amelia, though outwardly calm, often stared at her files with unfocused eyes, as if something heavy pressed on her heart. Eleanor knew she couldn't reveal the truth about Daniel yet, not until the right time. But she could nudge them back toward one another. Her chance came one evening. Amelia was leaving the office when she spotted Eleanor struggling with a heavy box of supplies near the service elevator. Without hesitation, Amelia rushed over. "Let me help you with that." Eleanor gave a weak smile. "Oh, thank you, dear. These old bones aren't what they used to be." Together they carried the box down the hall. When they reached the storage room, Eleanor lowered her voice. "You've been quiet lately. Is work too heavy?" Amelia hesitated, then sighed. It's not the work. It's people. They make you question yourself. Eleanor nodded knowingly. People will always try to twist the truth when they see light in someone else. The question is, do you trust your own eyes or their tongues? Amelia looked startled by the words, as though Eleanor had pierced straight through her. Later that same week, Eleanor approached Daniel as he was about to leave the building. He looked worn, his jaw set tight, his usually steady composure carrying a weight. Long day? Eleanor asked gently, leaning on her mop. Daniel gave a tired smile. Every day feels long lately. Because of her? Eleanor asked softly. Daniel froze, then chuckled bitterly. You see everything, don't you? I see more than most, Eleanor replied. And what I see is a man letting pride keep him silent. If she matters, don't let a whisper steal her from you. Daniel didn't respond immediately, but her words lingered in his chest long after he left. Meanwhile, Cassandra wasn't finished. She had learned the power of perception. Sometimes all it took was planting seeds of doubt to make them grow into weeds. At the next firm gathering, she deliberately spread subtle rumors. Amelia seems awfully close to that in turn, doesn't she? She said sweetly to a cluster of executives. I suppose some people will do anything to move up the ladder. The men chuckled knowingly, the women exchanged sly glances, and within an hour, the whispers had spread like wildfire. Amelia felt the sting of those eyes at her back, the murmurs that ceased when she entered a room. She tried to ignore it, but the weight was suffocating. Daniel noticed too. He clenched his fists, rage simmering. He wanted to crush the lies with a single declaration of truth. That he wasn't an intern, but the very billionaire who owned the empire they all served. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not until he was certain Amelia's feelings were for him, not his name. And so the web tightened. Eleanor worked quietly to mend what Cassandra sought to destroy. But the storm Cassandra was building was larger than even Eleanor had anticipated. The annual Johnson Group Charity Gala was the crown jewel of the company's calendar. Held in the grand ballroom of the Imperial Hotel, it was an event where power dressed itself in sequins, where fortunes whispered behind champagne glasses, and where reputations were made or destroyed. For Amelia, it was a chance to prove herself among the city's most powerful elite. She had been asked to represent the legal team, an honor for someone so new. But she also knew eyes would be on her, waiting for her to stumble. Cassandra saw the night as an opportunity. With careful precision, she planned a spectacle that would humiliate Amelia and taint her reputation permanently. The trap was simple yet cruel. Cassandra arranged for Amelia to be seated at a high-profile table, surrounded by executives and influential clients. Then she slipped false information into Amelia's event folder, a fabricated legal update about the Vargas case. It was subtle enough that Amelia wouldn't suspect it until she confidently quoted it in front of everyone. The night began beautifully. Crystal chandeliers glittered above, violins played softly, and guests glided across the marble floors in gowns and tuxedos worth small fortunes. Amelia entered in an elegant emerald dress, her hair swept up, her poise undeniable. Daniel, already present, caught his breath when he saw her. But he stayed at a distance, still carrying the weight of their strained silence. Dinner progressed, conversation sparkled, and then the moment arrived. Bernard, the senior partner, raised his glass and introduced Amelia as one of the firm's brightest rising stars. She will brief us on the Vargas situation, he announced, inviting her to speak. Amelia rose with confidence, her smile steady. She began outlining the legal strategies, then dropped Cassandra's planted information into her speech. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs rippled across the table. A Vargas family representative leaned forward, his face tightening. Excuse me, Miss Clark, but where did you get that information? That is completely inaccurate. Amelia froze. Heat rushed to her face. She quickly flipped through her folder, realizing with horror that the details she had quoted were wrong. The room's atmosphere shifted, whispers, skeptical glances, polite but cutting smiles. Cassandra, seated nearby, hid her smirk behind her wine glass. Bernard's expression darkened. Amelia, this is a serious error. We'll discuss this later. Amelia sat down, her hands trembling beneath the tablecloth. She felt every gaze like a dagger. The humiliation was suffocating. Daniel's chest burned with fury. He had watched Cassandra maneuver all night, and now he saw the gleam of triumph in her eyes. He wanted to expose her right there, to tear apart her scheme in front of everyone. But if he revealed his true authority too soon, Amelia might never forgive the deception. Instead, he slipped from his chair and quietly approached Amelia during the intermission. She sat alone at the edge of the ballroom, staring at her untouched champagne glass. "You don't deserve this," he said softly. Amelia looked up, her eyes stormy with shame. "Everyone thinks I'm a fool." "Then let them," Daniel said firmly. "Because the only people who matter will see the truth." She shook her head. "You don't understand. In this world, one mistake is enough to ruin you forever." Daniel's gaze hardened, his voice low. "Then I won't let them ruin you." Their eyes locked, the tension between them raw. Amelia wanted to believe him, but the humiliation still clung to her skin like smoke. Across the ballroom, Eleanor watched her son and Amelia together. She clenched her cane tightly, fury burning in her chest. Cassandra had gone too far. And Eleanor decided that night, if Cassandra dared to strike again, she would no longer stand by in silence. The morning after the gala, whispers spread like wildfire through the Johnson Group's marble corridors. Executives exchanged sly smiles, assistants gossiped over coffee, and Amelia walked through it all with her chin lifted high, even though her insides churned with humiliation. She locked herself in her office, replaying the disaster over and over. One false statement, one slip, and already her reputation was crumbling. But Eleanor would not allow it. That afternoon, dressed in her cleaner's uniform, she stepped into Amelia's office with a rag in one hand and a bucket in the other. Amelia, expecting mockery or pity, braced herself. Instead, Eleanor set down her things and said, "Don't let them break you, child." Amelia blinked, startled. "You don't know what they're saying." "Oh, I know," Eleanor said, her voice steady. "They've been waiting for you to fall. When people can't match your light, they throw mud at it. But mud doesn't last. It dries, it cracks, and it falls away." Amelia swallowed hard. For some reason, the old woman's words carried more comfort than anything she had heard from her colleagues. "What if I don't recover from this?" Eleanor's eyes softened. "You will. Because your strength is not in avoiding falls, it's in standing after them. And I have seen enough of you to know you don't stay down." Amelia's throat tightened. She didn't know why this cleaner cared so much, but in that moment, she felt less alone. Meanwhile, Daniel was working in silence. He had replayed the scene at the gala 100 times. Amelia had never been careless with her files. Someone had tampered with her folder deliberately. He began asking quiet questions, subtle, careful. He spoke with the printing staff, the clerks who handled event folders, even a junior assistant who had delivered them. Patterns began to emerge. The folder had passed through too many hands, but one name kept circling back, Cassandra. Still, he needed proof. One evening, Daniel lingered in the office after hours, waiting until most had left. He slipped into the records room, scanning through the digital logs of who accessed the gala documents. There it was, Cassandra's ID, time-stamped the night before the event. Daniel clenched his jaw. The fury was sharp, but he forced himself to breathe. Exposing her recklessness in the wrong way would only hurt Amelia further. No, this required precision. The next morning, Daniel passed Amelia in the corridor. She avoided his eyes, still raw from the sting of humiliation. He wanted to tell her everything, to put her at ease with the truth. But instead, he gave her a small, steady nod. It was a silent promise. "I will fix this. You're not alone." And as Cassandra waltzed into the office in a crimson dress, smiling as though she hadn't orchestrated Amelia's downfall, Daniel's resolve hardened. He would unravel Cassandra's schemes piece by piece. And when the truth came out, Amelia wouldn't be the one humiliated. She would be vindicated. The days following the gala were a test of Amelia's will. Every corridor seemed to hum with whispers, every boardroom filled with suspicious eyes. Yet, instead of retreating, Amelia doubled down on her work. She arrived earlier, stayed later, and buried herself in the Vargas documents with a determination that dared anyone to dismiss her. Still, the sting of humiliation clung to her. At night, when the city lights flickered beyond her apartment window, she replayed Cassandra's smirk in her mind. She hated that one woman's schemes could make her doubt herself. But Eleanor was never far. Almost every evening, Amelia found the cleaner nearby, sometimes humming softly as she wiped the glass doors, sometimes offering simple words of wisdom that struck deeper than any legal textbook. Slowly, Amelia's spirit began to mend. Meanwhile, Daniel was weaving a quiet web of his own. He knew Cassandra had tampered with Amelia's folder, but knowing wasn't enough. He needed to make Cassandra expose herself. He began laying small traps, subtle setups that would tempt Cassandra into repeating her games. First, he deliberately left a draft document unattended in the printing room, an important-looking file labeled Confidential, Vargas Settlement Terms. He then asked a trusted clerk to keep an eye on who accessed it. Within an hour, the file had been moved and returned, but not before Daniel confirmed through the clerk that Cassandra had lingered around it with unusual interest. Next, Daniel quietly altered a harmless internal memo, slipping in a fabricated clause that would be embarrassing if repeated publicly. Days later, Cassandra casually mentioned that very clause during a lunch meeting, smirking at Amelia as though she had uncovered a secret. It was all Daniel needed, proof that Cassandra was stealing and manipulating information. But instead of confronting her directly, he began gathering witnesses, people who had seen her meddle. He wanted her fall to be undeniable, witnessed by the very same colleagues who had laughed at Amelia. One evening, Amelia caught Daniel in the copy room, scanning documents with a rare intensity. "You've been busy," she said cautiously. Daniel looked up, his expression unreadable. "Busy is one word for it." Amelia hesitated, then added, "I owe you an apology. For doubting you. For letting someone else's words get between us." For a moment, Daniel just stared at her. Then slowly, his lips curved into the faintest smile. "You're not the only one who's been tested, Amelia." Their eyes lingered, the tension between them shifting. Not the brittle sharpness of recent days, but something warmer, something healing. Across the hallway, Eleanor watched with quiet pride. They were finding their way back, step by step. But Cassandra was already preparing her next move. She sensed Daniel's quiet watchfulness, and she wasn't about to let an intern and a scholarship girl undo her empire of influence. She would strike again, only this time, she intended to leave scars that would not fade. Cassandra was clever enough to know when her subtle games were no longer working. Daniel's quiet eyes unsettled her, and Amelia's stubborn resilience irritated her more than humiliation soothed her. So she sharpened her claws. One crisp Friday morning, a scandalous article appeared in the city's top business magazine. The headline screamed, "Johnson Group's Golden Girl Exposed, from street beginnings to questionable ambitions." The article tore Amelia apart. It painted her as an opportunist from a poor background who had used her scholarship and connections to worm her way into the company. It hinted that she was trading favors for promotions and suggested her relationship with Daniel was inappropriate. It was venom polished and packaged to look like journalism. By noon, the magazine was on every executive's desk. Colleagues who once smiled at Amelia now avoided her. Clients whispered. Even senior partners glanced at her with suspicion. Amelia locked herself in the restroom, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the words on her phone screen. Every sentence felt like a blade, each one cutting deeper into the identity she had worked so hard to build. When she finally returned to her office, Eleanor was waiting for her. "Child," the older woman whispered, "you cannot let this break you." Amelia's voice cracked. "This isn't just about work anymore. They've dragged my life through the mud. They've painted me as someone I'm not. How do I fight this?" Eleanor's eyes darkened with a quiet fire. By standing taller. By refusing to bow to lies. The truth always waits. It only needs time and courage to reveal itself. But Amelia was not the only one who had read the article. Daniel had a copy spread across his desk. His jaw was tight, his normally calm hands clenched into fists. He had endured Cassandra's games for too long. This was no longer office politics, this was war. That evening he made a call. Not as the humble intern everyone thought he was, but as Daniel Okoro, the CEO of Johnson Group, hidden in plain sight. "Shut it down," he told his private media consultant. "Find the source, trace the payment, and link it back. I want names. I want proof. And when you have it, I want it delivered directly to the board." His voice was icy, commanding, unrecognizable from the man who carried coffee cups in the office. Within hours, the machinery of his real empire began to turn. Quietly, invisibly, journalists were questioned, digital trails examined, and Cassandra's fingerprints began to emerge. Back at the office, Amelia had no idea that her so-called intern was already fighting battles she couldn't see. All she knew was that Daniel appeared at her door late that night with 2 cups of coffee. "You're not alone," he said simply, placing the cup on her desk. Something in his tone stopped her tears. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time noticed an authority in his presence she hadn't seen before. "Daniel," she whispered. "Who exactly are you?" Daniel hesitated, his lips parting as though to finally confess, when the office phone rang, breaking the moment. On the other end was Cassandra, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Tell Amelia she should start packing. Monday will be her last day." Monday morning arrived like a storm. The boardroom of Johnson Group, usually a place of polished presentations and controlled discussions, simmered with tension. Cassandra had called an emergency meeting, armed with the business magazine article and a stack of manipulated evidence against Amelia. "This company cannot afford scandals," Cassandra declared, her voice sharp and commanding as she stood before the directors. "Amelia Brown is a liability. Her background is questionable, her conduct unprofessional, and her presence a stain on our reputation. I recommend immediate termination." Several board members nodded uneasily. The article had done its work, casting doubt where once there was admiration. Amelia sat at the far end of the table, hands clenched under the glossy surface, her heart pounding. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but Cassandra's venomous confidence had stolen her voice. And then Daniel walked in, not in his usual quiet way, but with a calm authority that commanded the room. For the first time, he wasn't carrying papers or pretending to be an errand boy. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that fit his frame with effortless elegance, his stride measured, his gaze steady. "Pardon my intrusion," he said smoothly, sliding into a chair beside Amelia. "But before this board condemns a loyal staff member based on gossip, perhaps we should examine the facts." Cassandra's smile faltered. "This is a board-level issue, Daniel. Interns don't sit at this table." Daniel's lips twitched in the faintest smile. "You're right. Interns don't." His eyes swept across the directors, lingering just long enough to stir recognition in some of their faces. "But CEOs do." The room froze. Amelia's head snapped toward him, her eyes wide. Cassandra blinked, confusion flashing across her features before disbelief hardened her expression. "What nonsense is this?" Daniel leaned back, unhurried. "The nonsense," he said softly, "is that while you've been busy weaving lies, you've forgotten who truly runs this company." Several board members exchanged glances. One elderly director cleared his throat. "Mr. Okoro, we weren't expecting you today." Gasps rippled around the table. Amelia's mind reeled. Okoro? The name that carried weight in every financial paper, whispered in every luxurious conference hall. Billionaire. Visionary. The elusive man who rarely appeared in public. Her Daniel, the intern, was him. Cassandra, however, refused to yield. "Even if you are who you claim to be, this doesn't change the facts. Amelia is a risk. She should be removed." Daniel's eyes turned cold. "The only risk here," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "is allowing snakes to poison this company from within." He slid a folder across the table. "Inside, you'll find proof that the article was planted, funded, and orchestrated by none other than Cassandra herself. Digital transactions. Testimonies. Screenshots." The board erupted into murmurs. Cassandra's face drained of color. Amelia stared, speechless. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt the tide shift. Not because she had defended herself, but because Daniel, the man she thought was an intern, had stepped into the light with power she couldn't have imagined. But as the room buzzed with shock, Amelia's emotions tangled into knots. Relief. Betrayal. Awe. Confusion. Who exactly had she let into her life? And why had he hidden from her all along? The boardroom was chaos. Directors flipped through the damning evidence, some glaring at Cassandra, others whispering in disbelief. Cassandra tried to protest, but every word she spoke only tightened the noose of proof Daniel had laid before them. Amelia sat frozen, unable to process the storm raging around her. Daniel, her supposed intern, her companion in long nights, her silent ally, was the billionaire CEO she had admired from afar without even knowing it. When the meeting adjourned, Cassandra stormed out, her once untouchable aura shattered. Daniel, however, remained calm, thanking the board before turning his gaze to Amelia. "Walk with me," he said softly. Amelia hesitated, but her legs carried her after him through the gleaming corridors, past curious eyes, and into the private executive suite at the top floor. The floor reserved for Daniel Okoro himself. The doors closed behind them with a quiet hiss, sealing Amelia into a world she had only imagined. The office was breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, shelves lined with rare books, and a desk carved from dark mahogany. Everything screamed wealth, power, and legacy. Daniel removed his jacket, placing it neatly on the back of his chair. For a moment, he was silent, studying her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "You lied to me," Amelia whispered finally, her voice trembling. All this time, you let me believe you were just an intern. You let me open myself to you. I never lied, Daniel said quietly. I just didn't tell you everything. Her laugh was bitter, sharp. That's the same thing. He stepped closer, his expression softer now, almost pleading. Amelia, I needed to know who would see me, not the billionaire, not the CEO, not the headlines. Just me. And you did. You defended me when others mocked me. You treated me as an equal, not as a title. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, torn between anger and something deeper she couldn't name. Do you have any idea how humiliating this feels? To realize I've been spilling my fears, my dreams, to a man who had the power to change my life with a signature. I do, Daniel said, his voice low but steady. And I also know that if I had revealed myself from the start, you would never have let me close. You would have seen the suit, the money, the name, not the man. And I couldn't risk losing the one person who made me feel human again. Amelia's eyes burned with unshed tears. She wanted to hate him, to push him away. But she remembered the nights he stayed by her side, the quiet encouragement, the silent solidarity when the world turned cruel. She remembered his coffee cup on her desk, the way he had defended her in that boardroom when everyone else looked ready to abandon her. The silence between them pulsed with tension, half fury, half longing. You don't understand, she whispered finally. This changes everything. Daniel reached for her hand, hesitant, almost afraid. It doesn't have to. Amelia, I didn't fall for you as a CEO. I fell for you as a man who saw the woman you are. Her breath caught, her heart betraying her anger with its violent pounding. She pulled her hand away, pacing toward the window, her reflection trembling in the glass. Outside, the city glittered with promise. Inside, Amelia stood at the crossroads of trust and betrayal. And as she turned back to face Daniel, her voice shook, not from weakness, but from the weight of what came next. Then prove it, she whispered. Prove to me that Daniel, the man I knew, is real. Or else, all I'll ever see is the billionaire who played me. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes locked on hers. And in that suspended moment, the future of their fragile bond teetered between ruin and redemption.